So we have with us senior journalist Saba Naqvi. Name doesn't really need introduction, but anyway, a very, very senior journalist who writes for publications as a senior political commentator on television. And we are going to speak to her on the quote unquote hot topic of the day, which is hate. Saba, your 15th April 2020 video, shot spontaneously, spoke spontaneously. What was it about?
Teesta, I just got up that morning and the COVID process had begun, and I read this report in a newspaper, and it was just that Muslims were being denied admission into a particular hospital. All of us as citizens, we all function at multiple levels. There are these moments which become like which break your back. So I was just seeing all this, and the kind of hate that was spewed in the beginning of the COVID era against Muslims, taking the Tablighi Jamaat incident, and fruit vendors were being turned away, and it became a sustained campaign. So I was just sitting there. If you notice in that video, I'm actually wearing a night suit. I'm making this video recording because over the last few days, we have seen very, very troubling accounts of vegetable vendors of a particular community not being allowed to sell their wares. A daily newspaper today has a story how in Gujarat, patients were separated in a COVID ward on the basis of their religion. I was just, I just sat there and I said, what do people want? What do they just want? What is this building up towards? Are you asking the world's such a large community, so embedded in India, involved in every aspect of Indian life? What are you doing here? This is genocidal conversation. So it was just very spontaneous. Like I'm saying, I'm wearing you can see my night suit thing, and I just said it, and I just put it out there, and it just I didn't expect so many people to respond, and so on and so forth. So that is what was behind it. It was not thought out. It was done spontaneously, and I think that is what made it potent also. I was expressing my sheer pain, horror. What is this leading up to? That is what I was saying in that video, Teesta.
So senior journalist of so many years standing suddenly has to kind of deal with the fact that she's a Muslim journalist, right?
Yes.
And her identity is thrust on her. What is your message for the majority?
I think that the battles are being fought by so many people, and there's no way that if only Muslims fight this battle that it will be won. But my message is that I would say to many of my colleagues in the media, Teesta, I'm so ashamed and embarrassed at their complicity in what is going on. People who were regular journalists till the other day are today putting out stories. I'll give you an example of today. For instance, I just noticed this. I'm not giving you the name of the journalist, but rest assured he was a regular journalist. He has a story out that because the UP election is underway, and the second phase of the UP election takes place in areas such as Muradabad and Rampur, which have a very high Muslim population, 50%. But he puts out a story which says the Samajwadi Party sneaks in Muslim candidates, sneaks in Muslim. Now the point is, how do you sneak in? How is a candidate secretly going to stand for an election? So the whole rhetoric, the whole nuancing, and this is not even offensive, but it just shows you the paradigm within which they're all willing to operate. So I'm appalled at the space, at what has happened to the media space, of course. But what message can I give? I mean, who am I to give a message? I'm a chronicler of the times. A journalist records the stories of other people, right? Which is what I try to do. I am political, so I cover politics. I try to make sense of it, and it's a challenge. But it is there is also a pushback which is coming from ordinary people, and I see that it's harder and harder because the state is more and more vindictive. You do know that there are two cases now for me. Teesta, you have been in this space of legal battles and all for a long time. For me, one day I just wake up in the morning. I didn't even know. And this was, I think, in June 2021. And I had these messages from various people One of them was Prateek Sinha from Alt News. One of them was from my journalist friend in Varanasi. He says, "Get your lawyers ready. You are there." I didn't know what everyone was talking about. And then, of course, I found my name on a FIR along with other Muslims, 2 Muslim journalists and 3 Muslim spokespersons. Only Muslims were being on a FIR, and that did involve me having to shut down my home for a while. And my lawyer, Rebecca John, said you'll have to, because you can be arrested, so you'll have to just keep your house shut and just vanish for. So my daughter and I mean, we sort of left the whole house for 2-3 days, and I had to appear in a police station, and they never followed up. These kind of charges that I'm spreading communal hatred and all. Why? Because I tweeted a video of a man, which others were also tweeting, but they went and they charged, and this was done by the UP police. So anyway, so that was one matter. Then there is another matter where I had been dragged into a case just by, that's a civil case. Because again, I shared some story about a bunch of, which was done by an outlet called The Print, which says that some people who have been appointed in a university have their PhDs are plagiarized. Now, that was also done. I'm not getting to the names and all because that case is ongoing, but that is also done by a cartel of a particularly ideologically inclined people. It's just harassment. I'm not the author of the story. I haven't written it. So on 2 fronts, you have a criminal case, you have a civil case, but okay, there's still nothing. I mean, I also got a lot of support. I had people offering to represent me, just like that. I've had very good people step in. I've had a lot of love and support also. But the point is, why am I facing all this kind of, if they want to, that means they can arrest anyone, which they have.
In your first response, you mentioned when you saw those stories in April 2020 that it was the steps towards the genocide that you smelt and you sensed and you feared. Do you see that genocide coming?
What outraged me then is now seems to be par for the course. We have heard genocidal calls given inside in the Haridwar event. We've heard it elsewhere also. Anyway, here's what I think. I think that because I look at things from the prism of politics, I think so much of what happens is determined by what they think are the good political outcomes, favorable political outcomes. So much of this genocide and all is allowed to simmer in a sort of climate of electoral possibilities, especially because right now forget the Hindu-Muslim issue, we've had a very, very bad economic downturn in this country. All that data that shows you the poor becoming poorer, it is being felt and it is being articulated on the ground. So when you go on the ground, it's not as if people are going to step out and start murdering others, but if people get murdered, if they get lynched, they're not going to be punished. That is how it's not a dramatic genocide. It's a slow kind of a genocidal mindset, which is allowed to thrive and survive. But it will always be linked to the political outcomes. If they believe that this works for them politically, this kind of temperature, this kind of rhetoric, these kind of groups will continue to thrive. If somewhere down the line it appears not to be working, there'll be less motivation to do this. Yet we also have an ideological thrust. Let's also disengage from that's one side of it. We also have those who believe in this, and there's a funny economic dimension to what I think, Teesta. Many of these guys who go around attacking Muslim vendors, bangle sellers, Muslim people earning their livelihood, who are attacking them, they're getting publicity. They record themselves doing it, and they are getting paid work as part of these, multiple ecosystem of Hindutva, and so they at least get a day's wage for doing it. So there is now economic benefit in a dismal economic situation where there are no jobs available for people in being part of these brigades. So there are, nothing has a simple answer right now. This is happening for a multiplicity of reasons. There is an ideological thrust that believes that Muslims should not be here, Muslims should be sanitized out of this area. Why should a Muslim sell bangles? Why should a Muslim do this? Why should a Muslim act? Why should a cricketer speak well about Muslims? Why? Everything is there. The mindset is so poisoned in a section of Indian society right now, you know. So there's no one simple answer, and you know this as well as I do. This is working at multiple levels. They get money out of it, they get publicity out of it, they think they're being great men, throwing a few Muslims, but ultimately a lot of this is also linked to what they believe is a successful political project,
Saba, I want to come back to very simple things that I believe that, because we put out a petition about 3 weeks ago, because as outraged as all of us were in different ways when this wretched bully buy app followed the Suli auction of last year, and then you have the GitHub and the Clubhouse. We put out a thing that, it's about time the majority speaks, because while there are, you said, pushbacks and there is a silence, the majority, where there's judges, lawyers, teachers, the opinion makers, there should be a far more vocal and visible voice, is what we felt, So as a follow-up to that, we are kind of reaching out with a campaign and saying how you can be an ally of minorities. Because when we did that petition, I had a lot of people calling me to say, thank God you did it, because we are feeling so impotent and helpless. We don't like it, but we don't know what to do. So while some of us feel that there are obvious things to be done, there are many good people out there who don't seem to know what to do. So we are trying to say that, listen, acknowledge, don't go the denial route, don't go the deflection route, don't go the distraction route, don't get into gaslighting and dog whistling and ridicule. First of all, face up to this at multiple levels, and then take your step. Appropriate allyship in a real way, so that leadership is given to those who are being targeted and victimized. Let them have spaces to speak, because they're as much part of us as anybody else, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just asking you that, what would you say on these very simple terms that can be done in neighborhoods, in mohallas, in schools, in colleges? Just tuck, because sometimes people just need simple things to be done.
I certainly think, I find that in university campus atmospheres, because I often go there, I find students are also outraged. They may not be ideological. They may come from a sort of mainstream BJP kind of family, yet they are outraged about some of the things that happen, young people. So I think reaching out to them is very important in universities, in campuses, if anyone does that, because there I find the opinion is very, it sort of mocks the opposition, because I engage with, I teach also on and off. They mock the opposition. They don't think very highly of many opposition faces, yet they're disgusted by many of the things that are happening, So I think reaching out to young people is very important. Obviously, influencers, they always count, If one judge or so-and-so speaks out, it always counts, because here are people who are supposed to be the guardians of our constitution. So that counts. And unfortunately, even the spaces, the sort of legacy media spaces, have been sanitized. So anybody who raises these kind of issues is now writing in online spaces. It's like, I do write in a paper such as Deccan Herald or whatever, or it's off and on in the Telegraph. But I'm talking about the big media, the big, and you forget, let's even forget English. Let's look at the Hindi media. In my part, that's so important. So a lot of this, people have been pushed out of these spaces, and so there is a problem there, and so I think the only thing is to carry on with what we have in the internet space. It's not as if it's not heard. Internet, YouTube, I have just discovered, Teesta, because of the election season. So on the one hand, you have this this mainstream media, of which I go there as election commentators and all of that. It's so designed to help the BJP. Let's be honest. On the other hand, you have these YouTube shows in Hindi, which
Amazing.
I'm joining them. I'm joining these discussions. And you have these Hindi journalists from across UP and Delhi joining in. and the debate is entirely different. So even though if we read Dainik Jagran, we say, oh my God, Hindi media is all gone. But that's not actually true. And in this round of UP elections, I have rediscovered that. There's this whole army of Hindi journalists who are sitting there analyzing, who are actually on the ground and who are giving us a very different narrative. So I think those are some of the blessings, some of the spaces we still have, you know. So, and it's a relief to be part of those discussions, debate. You also learn something because you have information with them. So, you know, even though the overall tone of the Hindi media, the traditional legacy media is ghastly, you know, it's like the media is taking a lead in many instances, you know, or this
Journalism as
whole
genocide. Journalism
journalism
as
is
genocide.
genocide. Absolutely, yeah. So I think one has to just carry on. You know, we'll all keep our conversations going with us, with each other, and with all these other outlets that we have. I think that's one way to move on. You know, is to deal with this situation. You
And
know,
specifically now about the Muslim women's auctions. Okay, I mean, I feel it offensive even to refer to the terms because they're so offensive. But occasionally, I did it once just now because one has to just as a referral point. What happened June last year, and then again on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day this year. And whether it's 100 women or 200, it doesn't really matter. Just the idea and the concept and the completely Machiavellian, sickening way it has been done.
yeah.
I mean, theoretically, we know what it is. We know that it is targeting the women of the minority community, the successful women, the rational women, the good-looking women, the women, because they become they are the quote-unquote symbol in traditional terms of the honor of the community or in conservative. But I mean, I just like your reactions to that. I mean, as one of those persons who are inevitably going to figure on those lists, how do you react to this?
So you know, because the bully guy thing happened. Again, I heard it from fellow journalists. I got
Yeah.
calls. Yes, I was sent the list. I never looked at it. I never saw it myself. So I wanted to disengage because, you know, there were people from the international media and all who called up, wanted my story and all. It's not that I was running away from the issue. I have a view on the issue. I didn't want to, that whole objectification.
Yeah.
So I said, look, there are many younger women who are here on the list who will lead the fight. You please, you know, let them sort of be the voice of this. I don't really want to be, you know, one of the young boys who really tracks all of this. He did call me up. I won't tell you the name, but he tracks a lot of hate stuff. He called me up and he said, you know, there are all these people who want. I said, no, please not me this time. Just let the women, the young women who are being objectified, who are fighting these, let them. I don't want to make this my issue at all. Huh? But it just made me cringe. I mean, what can one
Yeah.
say? You know, it's sort of, you know, and now what we've seen, the kind of people who are doing it. So this bully bye thing, it involves the objectification of women first, and then of women who have something to say, who are visible, whose voices, who have bylines or whatever it is. Women, and then of course it moves on to the women of the minority community, you know, and there is between the narratives of those who engage with the narratives of hatred. You know, there's this whole thing about Muslim men seducing women and so on and so forth. And there's this whole thing about a Muslim woman, you know. Anyway, I don't want to go there, but I've heard, because I spent so many years covering the BJP and the VHP and the RSS. I once had an engagement with Giriraj Kishore, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad leader, you know, who said I've written about it anyway, you know, what all he said to me about how Hindu कन्याओं का कैसे seduction होता है, मुसलमान कैसे करता है, वो सब मैंने लिखा है, वो बोलने की बात है ही नहीं. It's too sort of salacious and too sort of, you know, but a lot of it is about that also.
Object is voyeuristic as well.
It is very much
Yeah.
so, very
Yeah.
much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole process is voyeuristic, whether it's the story, whether it's the name calling, whether it's the objectification. There is that whole element to it which makes it even more objectionable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Entirely. There's many. It works at multiple levels, you know, and just sort of I mean, it's one of the challenges of this age too, because there is a presence on social media, there is a presence on this. And how do you keep yourself out of as a journalist out of it, in a sense, and that's one of the challenges of just trying to just move ahead, at the individual level. And then, of course, the sort of, so much hate, so many threats, so much, it just goes on and on.
And to constantly remind yourself that you're both the target and yet you're part of a bigger whole, which is like navigating that individual and the collective all the time, which makes it, I guess, very, very difficult. Saba, I mean, I don't know what to say. There's so much to talk about, but I would just ask you, is there anything else that strikes you that needs to be out there I mean, I hate to use words like messages and all that, but the takeout from this, I mean, what you are a person with a lot of professional experience. You've been on the field, you've been on channels, you've been at various levels of the media spectrum, what is the takeaway?
I mean, I can only talk about my own life. So either, if when you can have moments when you're overwhelmed by the hate, when you feel, oh my God, this is like just ending. What am I going to do? But I think the big takeaway is that if you step away from your own story and you reach out and you, in every way, whether it's through a story, whether you reach out to the real victims out there. I'm still not a victim, and you reach out and you help people, and you've done some amazing work, Teesta. You continue to in so many ways. So I'm not an activist, but in every way that one can, if one hears, one listens, one offers, and I'm ready to sort of offer my name, my voice to many things, not, I mean, I'm as long as I can walk the path of still being a journalist, I will take those risks, even if that brings on more, that's the only way to survive it. Because if you lose courage, if you lose the capacity to fight, if you lose the capacity to speak the truth to power, which is what journalists should do, then you will lose your respect for yourself. So I think for the professionals out there, don't be immersed in your own story and your own victimhood, because we're all being targeted. That's there. Number one, there are, it's still a privilege to have the opportunity to engage with all the people at multiple levels, when the Delhi riots were taking place, for instance, I mean,
2020.
2020 at that time, because it was right here. So I was there. I was in fact caught in between of one side. Anyway, on the 25th of Feb, I think 26th, it was a pretty violent scene that was unfolding over there. And where have I spent my last two New Year's Eve? Okay, this year I went nothing. The year before that, I was in the Singhu border, the farmers' protest. And it's vivid because my phone got stolen in the crowd over there. Okay, so I remember that. The year before that, I was standing in Shaheen Bagh on New Year's Eve.
I was also there, Shaheen Bagh, and I was there on Republic Day as well.
Yeah. So this is how one's life goes, There is so much of human comradeship one has with people, causes, everything. Yeah, people are being blown apart, but it also tests their courage. It tests their convictions, and it's one has to get out of the mindset of wallowing in the self for many people. That I think is otherwise you can't do it. That I think is very, very important. And and I really think that I certainly agree with you that I would expect many more people to be much more vocal than they are, instead of just preserving their jobs and so on and so forth. I mean, I have people who will call up and say very bad, what is happening, and God, let's hope BJP gets defeated and so on and so forth. But they don't actually risk anything that they have.
Kuch to karo, na kuch karo.
To karo. Yeah. Kuch nahi.
Some 4 things, 2 things, 3 things, which are a little risky, which means that you're out there.
Yeah. Is not, that also is there. I mean, one notes it.
I mean, I get very angry about that, because I remember 2014 feeling this, because it was so, what was happening in India was so close to what was happening in America at that time, Trump coming in and all. And I remember that the fact that you had those huge demonstrations across America where there were women of all races and communities at the forefront saying, this man is not on, I mean, however bad anybody else is. Yeah. And I realized that here there was no such thing. And also the feeling for me that I felt that a large part of the people Vikas Apart, who voted for the guy here, clearly voted because of what happened in 2002. I mean, let's face it. India has to face that.
Yeah.
It's because of the anti-Muslim violence and pogrom and quote unquote the seen success of it for certain sections that he has got that support, that bottom line support.
Yeah.
And unless Indian society sort of वो हजम नहीं करेंगे हम कि that is the kind of hate that we are happy to live with, I don't think we'll be able to face it full on.
That's you have a point there, but the point is it's not all the people all the time, right? It's a section of the people. But I entirely agree with you. This frustration over those who are ready to come out and speak. I mean, among artists, let's see, we'll have T.M. Krishna available for all these events. Classical artists. I mean, there's no comparison what's happened in the West. You live in Bombay. I mean, cinema. We all know that people are being quietly persecuted. We know who they are. I know the names of some very brilliant directors and all. But I mean, so they've been forced to shut up. Who are being put through the ringer. One knows all that. A mega superstar who doesn't say. I mean, whose son was all of this is happening to people out there. There is a pushback, but they've not actually been able to say that much before all of this happened also. I mean, that's just it, In there, it's an entirely different kind of a situation, So, and you have such prominent, let's look at Black rights, the issues of Black Lives Matter and Black rights. You have such prominent people in the entertainment industry, in the news industry. I mean, even though the history of Black Americans is much more ghastly, up to recent times, it's really ghastly, in a sense, whereas the history, Islam, Muslim synthesis, it's a much more complex, historically different kind of a process. But we don't say very much, We just don't.
I had many Indian friends who were at the gates of the White House in Washington, D.C. 1.5 years back, when the Black Lives Matter demonstration. And all they kept texting me was, there are so many whites here also, and I realized that that's what eventually Indians have to think about, whether it's the Dalit violence, anti-Dalit violence, anti-Muslim violence. Where are the non-Dalits? Where are the non-Muslims? I mean, how many of the non-Muslims and non-Dalits are out there?
These are,
I mean, they're not. I mean, they are difficult questions, but they're the kind of questions I've been raising since 92, 93, and one is not liked for it because one keeps trying to disturb the kind of complacency. But I think there is something about Indian society that one needs to, and I think only steady questions is going. I don't think anything dramatic is going to change it. It's going to be just constantly working at multiple levels and not giving up. That eventually is going to change.
I think you're right. Absolutely, I agree with you, Teesta. There are these issues. But there are still some people who do speak out. It's not that.
No, and for me, the greatest hope is the leaderships emerging from the Dalit and Muslim communities, the young people, that despite they must have grown up in a far more articulate way, realizing politically what they are, how they are targets, and yet they've come out very self-confidently as leaders, as articulate leaders.
The idea of Dalit Muslim unity is a brilliant idea, but it just doesn't work actually, Teesta. I mean, there are so many divisions within the Dalit space. And I don't think the Muslim space has this, but it's also about only we can speak for ourselves, I think, up to a point. That it doesn't happen with Muslims so much. You can speak, others. So there are these complications, but yes, and I think there's also a sense, which is also partly true, that all of us are constantly engaging with the Hindu-Muslim theme, and we overlook the theme of caste, of tribal oppression. It's also partly true. Every day there is still a story about something ghastly happening. It's partly true, but these are the most stories that somehow get our national attention.
Because they're urban, whereas Adivasi, the story is much more rural India where nobody looks at anyway. Finally, anything else you want to say, Saba? Anything else in terms of the silence, the political silence, anything else?
Well, I mean, we are seeing politics shift, Teesta. Now, so there is so much conversation about all the parties following soft Hindutva, so on and so forth. And the kind of story that I mentioned in an earlier part of the conversation, the fact that the Samajwadi Party has put up Muslim candidates, is so outrageous to this mainstream journalist. Now, ignoring the fact that that area has a 50% Muslim population. So there is this whole argument being put forward that Muslims need to be disappear from the public space.
So this is very important, because without representation, you cannot have democracy. That's the whole point.
But now people seem to have accepted. There's a large section which seems to say it's okay to project that. Now, the question is, this is a very, very complicated issue, because you know, and I know that when we talk to people within the Muslim community, when they live in large areas where they're safe, you know, when they live in areas which has a very high demographics, where they're safe, then they, you know, the issue of personal safety doesn't engage them. Then they will talk about that what difference does it make who comes to power. There is a disenchantment with power, you know. The other issue is how far do you forgive the parties for being strategic? You know, there is a concept which Shia Muslims, one scholar in Iran had once told me. He called it taqiyya, that there is a time to be strategically retreat and to play yourself down for survival. You know, he told me we are in touch on. I had traveled in Iran as part of something, and he's a brilliant Indian guy who's in Qom, in the city of Qom. He's one of the he's close to one of the ayatollahs who run the country. So we are in touch. So he had explained concepts to me, talking to me about security, non-security, and so on and so forth. So one could say that these are strategic issues, that these leadership is being strategic. Let's say Akhilesh Yadav is being strategic. He's giving Muslim tickets, but he's not hanging around with too many Muslims around. Azam Khan is not in the right, not in the left. He's not giving as many as he may have given in the past. He is trying to appear as a pan-Hindu leader, as a pan-caste leader, which is the only way to defeat the BJP. Let's be honest, huh? That's also true. Yet there is this conversation, you know, going on there. Then you have, of course, you have that issue of the Delhi government, Mr. Kejriwal, who got the entire Muslim votes, but who has stayed far away, you know. In Shaheen, during the movement of Shaheen Bagh, I understand it. He should not walk into a BJP script. But subsequently, you know, should he have shown more symbolic empathy towards the guy? He'd won the election.
With his own elected representative, he seemed to have abandoned him after the 2020.
Yes, so these are issues that are there, that remain in the. What about the Congress, which I don't think has abandoned Muslims, but they don't have much left to abandon anyway. But every now and then they go and talk about their Janyo Dharui, and they go to you know, the whole thing is quite sort of pathetic in the way the BJP has managed to shift the poll. So. But
come back to Takaya. It's very interesting what you're saying.
So the point is, I understand the intellectual concept that when a community is under so much threat, as Muslims in parts of North India are, then the whole concept of invisible. I'm not saying you become secret and undercover and hide, but you accept that the political leadership which will represent you will not be able to show your face as much. That would be the strategic way of understanding it. But at the end of it, you would still want some representation once that strategy is over. You know, you would still want some things to come your way. So those are the issues that have to be seen, you know. But I will say one thing, that the BJP leaves no stone unturned to project every opposition party as Muslim loving, as if it's an abuse. So, you know, I'm also give them a long rope, understanding the politics of what, you know, I give them a very, very long rope, and I look at the end result. I do recognize that Arvind Kejriwal and the Aam Aadmi Party managed to defeat them twice over. You know, they did. That's a good achievement in a sense. But, you know, so let's see what happens in all of this.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the Hindi belt. The situation is different in
the West. And the West.
Gujarat, the West. Of course, the West. Nobody can ever forget Gujarat. You know? Yeah.
So anyway, I think the very interesting points that have come up. I was just 2 days back at Dr. Kafi Khan's book release in Mumbai, and I was saying that there were 3 books I personally feel that one should really work out to sponsor 500 copies each and send it to every judge and judge in this country, in every high court and the Supreme Court. One is, of course, his book, which is on the Gorakhpur medical hospital tragedy. The other one is Abdul Wahid Sheikh's Innocent Prisoners.
Yes.
And the third one is Mufti Abdul Qayyum's I'm a Mufti and not a terrorist.
Okay.
Now, yeah, why states is different, but they kind of position in different states, including Maharashtra, which did not have a BJP government at that time when Wahid was booked under Makoka. But it just talks about the sheer brutalization that can happen to you if you're incarcerated and if you happen to be a Muslim and a male, and a Muslim male, because there is a particular angle to that. But like you yourself said, it's so complex a conversation and it's so diverse and so difficult that we just need to, I think we need to keep having multiple conversations at many, many levels, which I know you keep doing. So thanks so much for your patience, Saba.
My pleasure, Teesta, entirely. Such a privilege to have you, to have the conversation with you, and entirely my pleasure.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
Catch up soon.
We must keep in touch and catch up.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you, Teesta.
Thank you, Saba.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.